afternoon, everyone. My name is Angela Thorpe, and I'm the director of the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission, which holds as its mission to preserve, promote, and protect North Carolina's African American history, arts, and culture for all people. As such, it is my absolute pleasure to welcome you all today to the fourth webinar in the Commission's six-part webinar series, Sustaining North Carolina's African American Heritage Institutions During COVID-19. During this series, we have explored how our state's Black heritage institutions can think innovatively about navigating the pandemic with the insights of heritage practitioners from across the state and culture workers from across the country, some of whom you will hear from just in a few moments from now. The North Carolina African American Heritage Commission received a North Carolina Cares Humanities Relief Grant from the North Carolina Humanities Council to execute this webinar series. You can learn more about the North Carolina Humanities Council online at www.nchumanities.org. Funding for North Carolina Cares has been provided by the National Endowment for the Humanities as part of the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act Economic Stabilization Plan. Just a couple of housekeeping notes before we dive into today's presentation. Please drop your questions today in the chat. It will be monitored throughout our program, and we will get to your questions by the end of the program. But again, if you could, just type any and all questions into the chat. I also want to thank the members of my team who made today possible. Adrian Nearday, Associate Director for the African American Heritage Commission, Kima Lassiter, Arts and Outreach Coordinator for the African American Heritage Commission, Erica Johnson, who is a graduate student in North Carolina Central University's history program, and Joel Cook, who is an emerging professional. Both Erica and Joel's work is being funded through this grant. Also, I want to extend a special hello to Kyrie Mason and Cliff Whitfield. These gentlemen are graduate students at North Carolina Central University and the University of North Carolina at Greensboro, respectively. And they are able to join us in this webinar series through this grant funding as well. So again, we're so happy for them to join us. I finally want to note that today's webinar will be available via recording, and all participants will receive the link. You can learn more about upcoming webinars in this series online at aahc.nc.gov or via our Facebook page. And just as a note, our final two webinars in this series will occur right at the top of the year in January of 2021. In the meantime, I am delighted to ask my colleague Adrian to introduce today's webinar guests.
Wonderful. Thank you, Angela. I appreciate it. So today we are excited to have three presenters with us, which include Rebecca Hyman, who is the Communication and Digital Engagement Librarian at the North Carolina Government and Heritage Library, which is part of the State Library of North Carolina. In her role, she coordinates the library's outreach efforts, including its marketing and social media presence. As well, we are joined by Karen Ipock, who is originally from the coast of North Carolina. She has her BS in history with a focus in education from Appalachian State University and an MLitt in visual culture from the University of Aberdeen. Karen began working for the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources in 2007, first as a historical interpreter at Tryon Palace Historic Site before becoming the site's Curator of Education. In 2013, Karen became the site manager for Historic Edenton State Historic Site before relocating to the Raleigh area. She is currently the Child Education Coordinator for the Department of Natural Cultural Resources Education and Outreach Division. Her main job focuses on creating educational content for the Department of Cultural Resources initiatives and serving as the State Program Coordinator for National History Day in North Carolina. And last but not least, Katie Smith will be presenting today as well. She brings more than 10 years of digital communications and outreach experience to her role as the Chief Content Officer at the North Carolina Department of Natural and Cultural Resources, where she helps tell North Carolina's stories and oversees the department's editorial and content production team. She has a full spectrum of experience across platforms, including video and emerging social media, and works with divisions across the state on digital initiatives and content strategy. She has been featured as a speaker on Microsoft's Underground Tour and Hack the Classroom, as well as highlighted on Skype's Social Good blog for digital outreach. And with that, Katie, if you want to get started.
Thank you for that introduction, Adrienne. So like she mentioned, I'm Katie Smith. I'm the Chief Content Officer for the Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. And so a lot of the work that I do is around social media and content that helps tell the story of all of our sites across the department. And so today, when they reached out to me to speak with y'all, I wanted to talk a little bit about what I've learned in the over a decade of working in digital outreach and probably in the last 7 years for social media, spotlight kind of what museums are doing right now, and then really highlight some tools that I think might be helpful for y'all. And so I will provide my slides to Adrienne to send out in case you missed some of the things that I mentioned, so you'll have links to it. So before I do get started, I do want to mention that I understand that many of you are at sites where you might be the social media manager, the director, the interpreter, the educator, doing lots of different things, wearing lots of different hats. And so I know that some of the things I might mention might be a little bit of a higher capacity. And so I don't want people to feel overwhelmed because I am going to have a lot of information to share. So let me get started here. Okay, so like I said, we're going to talk a little bit about what I have learned, especially during the pandemic, and what I've seen be really successful. So the first thing I want to note is that a lot of things I'm going to talk about are things that you probably could Google pretty easily. There are tons of people writing about social media every day. You can find resources pretty easily, but not always specific to museums. And so that's really what I wanted to highlight today. The first thing I always start with is, what is social media? Well, we know it as a platform as Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. But really at the heart of social media is that it is a conversation. And so in order to be successful in social media, you have to make your voice stand out. I know in my mind, a lot of the different museums I know that are really successful at this and the ones that have really become at the forefront. And so when you think about the accounts that you follow, it's usually the people behind it, right? Because you're adding your own flavor, you're adding your own voice to that. A great example would be the Museum of English Rural Life, which kind of started this benchmark when this tweet became viral. And it was kind of not the first time, but really a great example of a museum not sticking to a very specific type of voice. It's very approachable, it's very authentic, and really put them on the in the highlight of museums that were very small, actually very small rural countryside museum had one person running social media to be the museum of the year. So the first thing you kind of have to do is have a plan. I think this is a really great example and a good breakdown of kind of where to start with. One thing I always tell people when I meet and I consult with our divisions is, don't feel like you have to go onto every platform. Start with one platform, the one you're reaching the most people on. typically that's going to be Facebook, and really start with your strategy there, because every single audience is going to be different on different platforms. So you're going to kind of start coming up with, what does that plan look like? In order to have that plan, you have to have a voice. When we talk about social media voice, we're talking about the tone. Do you want to be a little bit more academic in how you talk? Do you want to be a little bit more laid back? And so this kind of Venn diagram breaks down the different types of tones that different social media has. Now, obviously, we're in government, so ours is a little bit more formal. We're kind of restricted in how we can engage, but we still try to make it playful and fun. The next thing you're going to do is look at your audience and the numbers. One of the biggest free assets you have as a museum is the data that these social media platforms provide. If you go into your insights, you look at your audiences, it'll tell you exactly who is engaging with your content, how old they are, their background, demographics, all of that. And that's going to be really helpful for when you start rolling out that content. Now, once you do that, you have to determine the metrics. Now, I always tell our sites, don't get too wrapped up in the numbers, because I know I put my heart and soul into a post, I put it up, and we get 2 likes. That happens. It's sad, but it happens. But just like with anything that you're experimenting with, you can take that content, you can recurate it and try again and see if you can really hit those audiences that you're striving for. So you're going to figure out, what are the things you want? Do you want to reach more people? Do you want to have more engagement? Do you want to get more followers? These are all goals that you might set. Now, a great example of this plan and really seeing it to execution is the Smithsonian. The Smithsonian put out identity guidelines for all of their institutions a couple years ago. This is available on the web, and it pretty much lays out exactly all the things we just talked about. Who is their audience? What is the language that they want to use? That includes inclusive and accessible language. That includes their tone, the voice, and then they use that throughout all of their brands. One of my favorite brands to follow in the museum world is obviously the Smithsonian National Museum of African American History and Culture. As soon as I see their content, I know it's them. They make sure their branding is put in their content. They have a very approachable, informative tone. They use a lot of things from their collections, and they do a really great job of reaching their audience. Now, whenever you're creating content to share on social, the number one thing you have to ask yourself is, why do people want to share it, right? Lots and lots of studies have been done on this, and this is what they have concluded. People want to share things that are cause related. They want to share things that have personal connections. They want to feel more involved in the world, things that define who they are and inform or entertain. This is where I think some places kind of miss the mark, is they're thinking about, well, what would I want to see? But what you want to ask yourself is, what do your audience want to see, right? Because I know the things I might be interested in aren't necessarily the same that our followers are interested in. So once you kind of figure out, what do you think is going to share? Like, what does your audience want? We know that they like, for us, they love nostalgia. They love food. They love anything to do with sports. Obviously in North Carolina, it's, tends to be basketball, barbecue, and beer are things that are popular. So you're going to start building out what's called a content calendar. Now, one of the things that I've learned, that when you're building out that content, and that content could be, video, it could be photos, it could be a poll, it could be just a prompt to ask people questions. You want to remember what we call the E3, right? So engage, entertain, and educate. And you want to balance these throughout your content, so you're continuously getting new followers, and you're wanting them to share this content, so you kind of can think of different ways to do this. Traditionally, a lot of people saw Facebook as a marketing platform. Unfortunately, it is pay to play nowadays. So if you really want to reach a lot of people in market programs, you typically have to pay for that. So what you're going to be relying on, things like Facebook or Twitter, is the content itself and how you're engaging people with that content. So when you're thinking about content, the thing that I always tell people is think evergreen, and that means things that you can use all the time. So for example, for us, we know every month there's going to be national days, holidays, themes that we can fit into. For example, every year We always have National Moonshine Day, and obviously North Carolina has a lot of connections. So we have a video that we share every year, and it always gets lots of engagement. It's very popular, but we're not creating new stuff all the time. So we use our website through blogs to create a lot of this content that we can use at any time of the year, and it's going to save you a lot of time. So once you get that new content, people share it. They're like, I really love this. I'm going to follow this page. And then once you get them in, you can start promoting and marketing a lot of your events. So over the pandemic, we had a lot of people that went digital. We saw a lot of creative ways that people were engaging with their audiences. So I wanted to spotlight some of the ones that have been highlighted. If you didn't hear about this one, this is the National Cowboy Museum. Obviously, their social media manager wasn't at the museum. The only person at the museum was the security guard. And so they said to Tim, Tim, would you mind sharing stuff on Twitter? And they had never done this before, and it was so popular because Tim brought a totally different perspective to their audience, something they hadn't seen before. And people loved their tweets. They loved engaging. And I know that the person who runs the marketing communication said that their engagement just exponentially went up overnight because they added a different voice, a different perspective to their audience. Another one is the Rural Academy. This is one where they were just playful, and they said, hey, who can draw the best ham? I mean, it really doesn't have anything specifically to do with anything, but it was enough that people were sitting at home and they thought, I want to take a break. Let me see if I can draw a ham. And so this is another example of thinking a little bit outside the box and what content people are interested in. They didn't necessarily do this on Facebook because Facebook doesn't allow for you to easily share, but this was really popular, for example, on Twitter. Obviously the Field Museum, the Shed Aquarium, they let their penguins out and let them roam around, and they just had the best time, and it brought joy and happiness to people's lives. And so that's where we see a lot of museums that really excel at bringing that extra something to a lot of people that are dealing with a lot of things right now. Another great example, obviously I get a lot of questions about TikTok. I've seen a lot of successful TikTok, some that are a lot harder to get into as far as making that content. Some great examples would be the Black Country Museum and actually here in North Carolina, Old Salem. So they took something that's historical but brought it to a modern narrative, which has been reaching new audiences. So they've automatically created content to hit those 15, 16, up to 21-year-olds on TikTok that probably weren't following them on Facebook or following them on Twitter, for example. Now, one of the ways you can save time is through user-generated content. So UGC is content that is people every day when they visit your site, if you have a physical location, they are tagging you online. So for example, I can go into Instagram, I can put in the geotag for Umstead State Park. It'll bring up every person that's tagged that location. I can see how people are using the site, what they're doing. They're getting married, they're hiking. One of the things that we noticed a lot of people doing was cosplay, which was an audience we had never thought about engaging with before. But we saw a lot of people using our sites to do photo shoots and things like that. So that next year we went to Comic-Con, and so we were able to market a lot of our sites and engage with a new audience. Another example was a lot of people were taking their pets. So we started a Pup of the Week that has been really popular. So these are some ways to look at your audience and how they're engaging with you and how they're using your physical location. Now, to make life a little bit easier, there's a lot of tools out there. A lot of the tools I'm going to mention are my favorite tools personally that you can use to navigate your social media platforms, to also create content. The best part, most of these are free or have pretty good nonprofit discounts. So these are things that I always tell people to ask for is nonprofit discounts. A lot of them have it. So the first one that's free that I think is really helpful is every time someone engages with one of your posts on Facebook, if you click on the bottom left corner where it shows you how many people have liked or whatever, it'll pop up a screen that shows you who's following you and who's not. And so you can easily go in and invite, as you can see, those people to follow your page. I do this on every post because there's a good percentage of people who maybe saw our post that was shared but don't actually follow us. Another way is to organize your content is Trello. Trello is a free kind of a project management software. We use it to lay out our posts. We use it to communicate, write copy, edit copy. It's just a really easy way to navigate all that content you might want to schedule or share. Another one that I use a lot is Snapseed. It's a free app that's really great for making high quality photos as far as saturation, any kind of photo editing that you want to do, cropping, really great resource. The next one I use a lot is Desktop for Instagram. Obviously, Instagram is very frustrating because they haven't really figured out a way to make it a desktop application, but Desktop for Instagram is a plugin. It allows you to upload video, pictures, and things like that if you want to do it on desktop versus your phone. The other one that I use a lot is headliner.app. This is a great resource for making content that's snackable. And by snackable, I mean like under 60 seconds. It might be audio clips. It might be a short video you shot on your phone. And one thing to keep in mind is social media is very forgiving. So you don't have to have super highly edited stuff. You can really keep it more basic. So for example, I used headliner.app to take one of the clips from the speech that Martin Luther King Jr. gave at Rocky Mount. And this was, as you can see, really popular because most people don't click on the links to follow it through. So this was an easy way to keep that sound in the platform. Canva is a free graphic design. This is a great resource if you want to be able to edit photos, create really easy social media graphics. They do have a nonprofit discount. They also have the free version, which gives you a lot of room. You can add your branding, your logo, all of that. I use that to create this short video. You actually can make animated videos and add text to it. For this one, that was for National Moonshine Day that I mentioned. Capwing's another great one that allows you to make GIFs, videos, captioning. So that's a question I get a lot about. It can let you caption videos. We use Sprout Social for our software management, or for our social media management, but it's a great way to kind of get everything in one place if you want to schedule and all of that, if you don't want to use the native, the ones that are already built into Facebook. Later is for Instagram, but the great thing about Later, it also has a free version of link in bio. So you know on Instagram you can't put a hyperlink in the caption. So people say visit the bio. It lets you curate what those links look like and make it really easy. The next one is, this is a really easy mobile-based app where it lets you take out space breaks on Instagram captions. This is one of the biggest complaints that I see people have. So you can easily write your caption and take all the formatting off. And then Linktree is another option that's free that allows you to put links in the bios. The next one is Repost for Instagram. So this is one, once again, if you have user-generated content, you want to easily share it on your Instagram account, you can use Repost. That'll pull that image, pull the caption, and then repost it to your Instagram account. And this one, Facebook Business Suite, is really helpful for if you don't want to log into your personal Facebook account to like manage your Facebook pages. You can download Facebook Business Suite. Will only access the pages that you're admin on. So these are some examples of some great resources. So I know I went through that pretty quickly, but I wanted y'all to see some of the resources that are available out there, especially if you're from a small or mid-sized museum, that are really helpful and free to be able to navigate that. I'm not sure if we have any questions. Looks like, okay, so we have a question about what was the software for clipping video. So there's a couple. You can use headliner.app, the one I mentioned, and I'll drop all these in the chat. You can also use Capwing. Capwing allows you to clip videos. There's also InShot, I-N-S-H-O-T. That's an app that allows you to do all the video on your phone if you want to. That's another free app. And so one of the things that I always tell people is start simple and really just experiment, try new content, try new things. Surprisingly, the stuff that always does really well for us are things that we're like, I don't think anybody would like this. And then we put it up and it's wildly popular. So those are just some examples of some of the things that you can do with your social media. I'm always here to help. So even though some of you are not with the department, don't hesitate to reach out to me. One thing I do want to plug that has been a great community for me and others. I'm actually admin on a Facebook group for museum social media managers. I'll drop that link in the chat as well. I invite y'all to join. It's a private group, but it's social media managers for museums all over the world. And we're constantly sharing resources, troubleshooting things, asking for help. So it's a great resource to see kind of what other places are doing and if you need help with anything.
Thank you, Katie. Karen?
All right. All right, so I'm going to kind of build off of what Katie was talking about, but targeting the digital educational resources and materials and how to create those so that they can be shared out to your kind of online and virtual audience. So as you're getting started with creating new resources, especially things have shifted with the pandemic as always, and so you might be taking a different approach than you have in the past. But the three things you really want to identify are your goals, your audience or audiences, and your potential barriers. And those potential barriers are not just for what y'all are going to encounter on your end, but also what your audience might encounter with either access or using the materials. And you want to really create with those barriers in mind. And so we want to take a closer look at each of these. So for identifying your goals, you want to ask some questions. One, are you continuing your institution's current mission, or have you kind of had to evolve it due to the changing climate the pandemic has brought on? And if you are changing, are you taking your current services online and just making them virtual, or are you trying to actually meet a new need that the community has? For instance, I know a lot of sites and cultural institutions have been opening up their doors if they have Wi-Fi, to allow students for using their Wi-Fi access. So sometimes you might be changing and doing something that you wouldn't do in a normal circumstance, but in this year you are. And you also want to ask yourself, are you trying to just continue your support or attract new support? And is that in the way of trying to get visitation numbers? And I say visitation, of course, that would be online visitation in this case, and engagement. Or are you actually trying to replace lost revenue from not having, for instance, maybe ticket sales or fundraising events and those types of things? And for identifying your audiences, there's really probably three audiences you're probably going to try to target during this time. One is the classrooms, and some questions you want to think about with classrooms are currently your target classrooms. Are they in person right now? Are they hybrid? Or they are completely virtual? And what grade levels are you trying to target? I know, you know, most of us in North Carolina always try to target 4th and 8th grade, just because North Carolina history shows up in those two grades curriculums. But you might want to go broader than that and target younger audiences or even older audiences. Families, you want to consider the demographics that you're trying to target. Are these rural families? Are they urban families? Are you trying to do a mixture of both? Are there language barriers you need to take into account? And then for your general audience, are you trying to just maintain and make those connections with your current audience that usually participates in your on-site visitation? Or are you actually trying to reach a new audience, or trying to balance reaching both audiences? And then, of course, for identifying barriers, there's barriers that happen on both ends of the spectrum, on ours as the creators and the institution, and then on the audience side. And one of those, of course, right now is the ever-changing circumstances. You know, it's day to day right now. We don't know if we're going into a lockdown again. You know, can you have events? what do those events need to look like if you do? So you want to try to create so that it can easily shift between no matter what kind of happens with the current situation. Technology, of course, many of us are having broadband and Wi-Fi issues, so trying to come up with ideas of how to tackle those. Budget constraints, those happen, of course, on our end. Maybe we don't have the money to pay for services, but it's also on the audience end. Many have lost their jobs, so if we're trying to create programming and virtual content that costs money, we might not have the audience for that due to those challenges. And of course, right now we're dealing with virtual fatigue. Many of us are on Zoom presentations and conferences all the time. Students are turning in online all the time. Try to combat and balance how to navigate the challenges of virtual fatigue right now. And then there's the fact that most of us are dealing with very difficult subject matter. It might be hard history or painful history or controversial issues that are sometimes hard to teach, especially remote or through a PDF guide or something. So try to come up with ways of how to tackle those in very sensitive ways that people can, it is still a conversation and it's still tackling those issues. And one tip that we have with that is choose your battles. You're not going to solve every barrier, so pick the ones that you can actually fix and focus on those. Don't get bogged down in that you can't tackle every barrier that comes your way. So for classroom and resources, and you want to make sure you're taking into account what current situation your classroom teachers are in. Teachers are in survival mode right now. When the pandemic first started, we kind of bombarded as institutions, oh, we have this service, we have this online program you can do. And teachers are just kind of overwhelmed by it all and all the options. So really think of, your communication with teachers. Don't send emails every day or multiple times a day. Think very strategically in how you're getting these resources to the teachers. Consider that they're teaching both in person and virtually, most of the time of the same day. They might have some students physically in the classroom right now, but they might also have 30 on Zoom. So you kind of need to create materials for classroom teachers that can navigate between the two, whether they're having them in person or online. And they too have budget constraints. So if you're trying to charge for, say, a field trip or some sort of extra program, remember they might have a hard time collecting money because they're having issues with communication or actually seeing the students, or the students have financial issues. One tip that we always suggest is to consider creating lesson activities versus full lesson plans. And the reason we say that is because lesson plans are really hard to create for a wide spectrum of teachers. If you're targeting a very specific school, for instance, you might be able to get away with creating those lesson plans because you know how long the classes they have, you know more of the particulars. But we have some, especially like high school classes, that might be 90 minutes long, and some that might be closer to 45 or 50 minutes. You also don't know how much of that time teachers need to actually set up the class and, check homework, check attendance, and that type of thing. So it's really hard to create a very organized lesson plan that will fit for any teacher. And most of our teachers are veteran teachers. They have their routines. They're not really looking for a creation of a unit or a lesson. They're looking for quick activities that they can freshen up their current existing programming. So consider lesson activities. They're a lot easier to plug in and they'll probably get more use. And similarly, you want to maybe consider, if you're doing virtual field trips or online programming, consider doing both a mixture of on-demand and recorded so that you're meeting both needs. It's really hard to predict their schedules and what day of the week or what time might be best for on-demand. Or not on-demand, live. So you want to try to do a balance so that you're meeting both teachers' needs. And one easy way to do that is something similar to this, where you do it live, but then you also provide a recording at the end. And another crucial thing with creating materials for teachers is that you connect to the educational standards. And if you're at a history site, you know, be aware that social studies standards are actually under revision right now and will go into a new one set next school year. So you want to create materials to meet those. And though we as institutions and non-formal educators can oftentimes reach histories and subjects and arts that aren't covered by the standards, you still need those connections in order for teachers to be able to use them. So you want to make sure those connections are clear. And I will share a link to a Google Drive. The lesson plan template's not up there just yet, but it'll be up there later on today. That is just a template that kind of gives the different things that you might want to include when you're designing a lesson plan or a lesson activity to make sure you hit those benchmarks. And with that, do the work for the teachers. You know, create guides, create PowerPoints that are quick that they can plug into their existing PowerPoints to introduce the topic that you're covering with your lesson activity or your plan. You know, create resource lists where they can find more information. It doesn't have to be your resources if you haven't been able to build them, but highlighting other institutions maybe that have those resources. Do the work for the teachers, and that'll make it much more easier for them to use. And a key thing is picking the right tools. You really want to investigate your target schools that you're targeting to try tools are they currently using? Are they doing Zoom classrooms? Are they doing Google Meets? Are they using Canvas or Google Classroom to manage their platforms? And you want to build those materials based off of that. Some schools restrict use of Google products, some don't let you use YouTube. So of course you don't want to put a lot of time and effort into creating YouTube videos if it's not going to be used. And to break down some of those resources, Google Classroom, you know, some museums have actually created Google Classrooms. I think there's easier ways for you to get them as resources out there than to create a formal classroom for your site or institution. But there's ways that you can create materials using Google Docs and Google Forms and Google Slides that makes it easy for teachers to share if they're using that platform. You can also add onto your website a Google Share button, and there's a document that's in that shared folder that I'm going to give you that talks about how to do that. And so if you have an education page or educational resource on your website, you can add that button and teachers can just click that and it easily shares to their students through Google Classroom. Bitmoji is a thing that you've seen a lot, and a lot of people think they're actually websites, but they're actually Google Slides. Google Slides is kind of like PowerPoint, and just a way to share your resources in a fun and engaging way. It works really well, especially with younger audiences. And basically use images and hyperlink through the slides to take the visitor or participant to certain things. So you can link to online videos, you can link to downloadable templates and craft activities. So it's just a great fun way to share your resources. You can create with Google Slides virtual museums, and in that document I'm going to share, you have a template that you can use or get inspiration for, I guess I should say, to create or turn your historic site, your museum, your art museum into a virtual museum or site. One thing that we suggest is don't try to replicate your on-site visitation. You know, you still want people to come and visit you whenever things do open back up. You want to try to showcase the things that they wouldn't necessarily be able to see maybe on a regular visit. So maybe take them to an area of the museum that is hard to get to, like your collection storage, or maybe share a part of your historic house that you don't usually get to take people to, but due to safety. You know, there's a lot of virtual opportunities to share those kind of hidden histories or hidden cultural sites through using something similar to a virtual museum on Google Slides. Google Slides, you can create games. I have a link to free templates of how to create games using Google Slides. And these are one of my favorite. You can create you can create notebooks, virtual notebooks, where you click on any of the tabs on the notebook and it opens up a page. And on that page, you can have websites embedded. You can have videos, you can have content, you can have craft directions. So it's just a great way to make an interactive guide either to your site or maybe an activity guide geared towards students or kids. Padlet is a resource. It's like an online bulletin board. It's just a great way to share your resources if your, say your website maybe is more challenging to share resources to teachers. It's just a great way to organize your materials so it's all in one place. And then we have a couple games. Kahoot is like a trivia game. Goose Chase, those both are typically paid services. They do have some free options. But they're a way to engage and create virtual programs that make things more interactive, even in the virtual setting. So when creating things for families and at home, you want to take in some considerations. For instance, the parents might need more guidance and background history than the teachers. You know, teachers are trained on how to teach. They're trained on subject matters. The parents might not have that background, so you might need to help provide more information for them on how to go about leading an activity at home. You want to try to reach those multiple age groups. It might not be cross-generational, but maybe just taking the fact that people have older siblings and younger siblings, and an activity that serves both is really great. Consider a variety of setups. You know, don't assume everyone has a house or is in an urban setting. You know, consider that everyone might have a different home setup at their disposal. And really crucial right now, talking about the virtual fatigue, don't forget the offline activities. Have materials online that they can download and do offline, and give them that break from computers and screens and those much needed kind of engagements that happen offline. And last but not least, one thing I just wanted to point, this weird thing about the pandemic and going virtual, it broadens our audiences. You know, typically most of us were thinking very locally of our community and our engagement. You know, we might get the occasional out-of-state visitor, but this is a way to reach people from across the country, across the world. And so you might need to, if you're trying to target that broader audience, tweak your resources to meet those needs. You want to make sure that you connect your site to the broader history and current events to kind of show how it fits into that picture, because they might not be as familiar with our local history. And it's a great way to share your message and your community to a much more international setting. So you just want to take that into account. And I will share just a moment the link to that Google folder, and more my slides and that template will go in there shortly after the presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen. Rebecca, if you'd like.
Hi there. I'm Rebecca Hyman with the State Library of North Carolina. And so I'm just going to wrap up today's talk about just everything that the library has to offer for you. So Katie talked about, you know, how to post content, and Karen talked about the educational aspect of that. So now I'm going to just talk about what we have at the library, all free resources to help you find that content, and information about your local area, local history, cultural history, things like that. So let's, okay. Okay. So just before we get started, I just want to know, let's see, just gauging from the group, what is the focus or scope of your museum or organization? So then we could try to then, with the different examples, we can throw things in. So if you go, I'm gonna start, I just brought up the annotate tool, this little toolbar you can see on the top, and click on where it's the T for text, and you can just type right on the screen, like I'm doing here, and then we can all see. And also, it's just good to know. So as a librarian, we always just want to help people. And we want to give you all the information. So this might be something to help you follow up on. So if you want to participate, that's great. So what is the focus or scope of your museum or organization? Does everyone see what I just did here?
Yes, Rebecca, we can see it. I know I'm having difficulty using this feature, but I'm not sure if other folks might have better luck.
Okay. Well, this is also my first time using it. I also wanted to show, as we're all living online, just an example of doing engagement as well in a Zoom, like in the Zoom world.
So perhaps if folks want to participate, we can drop what our focus or scope is in the chat. And maybe Adrienne, if you could read out some of what you're seeing, that would be great.
Okay. So this also, I just wanted to give an example of, how we could do that, and new skills that I've been learning with doing that. So great.
So far, we've gotten folks from a state historic site. As well, I shared that the commission shares African American history, art, and culture.
Okay. Oh. Okay, so as I said, this is the first time I'm using this now. I can't get rid of North Carolina.
We also have folks from Friends of Overland Village who educate the community on African American contributions to history, as well as the Pope House Museum, which shares Raleigh history.
Oh, great. Great. So, so like I said, I'm from the State Library of North Carolina. And if you're not familiar with us, we are located in Raleigh, and there's 3 parts. Library development that supports libraries throughout the state of North Carolina, and also the Library for the Blind and Physically Handicapped. So if you have anyone that you have in your life or in your community that could use those services, it's a free service for any North Carolinian who can't read a book traditionally. If they have visual impairment or just anything, it's a free service. So I just wanted to put a plug out there for those 2 parts of the library. And then where I work, the Government Heritage Library, we basically focus on everything North Carolina and South and Southern culture. And so some of the things we're going to talk about. Here we go. So from North Carolina history and culture to current state government information, as well as historic information. I know with being with a small institution, you may need to get grants or things like that. We can help with services, providing data and statistics. And also a big draw that people use our resources is family history. And so you don't necessarily have to have North Carolina roots to use our resources. We can help you get started. And so one thing I just wanted to talk about, and this is just a crash course in the library. And so when you're looking for information about research projects or whatever your programs that you're developing, you're not familiar with the NCpedia. It's our online encyclopedia all about North Carolina. And it's all vetted information. We are adding new things all the time, and we're trying to just represent all North Carolina voices in current and historical information. So just a few things that I wanted to share with you. There's many different ways you can browse it, but we have featured North Carolina topics, and you can see some of these right here from, if you're familiar with the MyNC from A to Z book from the Heritage Commission, we have created a a collection of articles featuring the topics that are in the book, as well as the NCpedia K-8 collection. So these are just special topics from women's history to African American history to American Indian history, all related to North Carolina. So this is just an example of the African American history page, the exploring topic. And as you can see, that we have all different topics here, and everything may be linked to lesson guides and more information and things like that. And then okay, so we'll do a live search here on NCpedia with the selected topics, and you can see here with African American history, we have it sectioned out from historic places to education and things, different categories like that. So for our page on North Carolina's HBCUs, we have an interactive timeline. We have further information. If you're not familiar with NCpedia, you can click on other subjects. And for this article, you can see it has additional resources if you want to go further on Cottrell College. And if you are ever in need of help, on a lot of pages throughout our website and the NCpedia is this Ask a Librarian. That is an online chat, and it is, you can click on it during our business hours, Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and one of our staff members will help you get the information that you need. So, okay. So again, I know this is a crash course because we just have a couple minutes here, but along with the NCpedia is our digital textbook on North Carolina history, on U.S. history, called Anchor, which stands for a North Carolina History Online Resource. So if you're familiar with UNC's NC Learn project they had several years ago, the library has taken in that content. And so it's written for 8th grade North Carolina history, and it just shows you can see the table of contents. It's an ebook, and we are updating with new information, links to primary resources, and to multimedia videos and different activities. So this is a great resource as well if you're looking for local information for your site. or for North Carolina in general. And also our digital collections, which is the project with the State Archives of North Carolina. You can see that, and I see lots of people are writing things in the chat. So I haven't looked at that yet. We can do that at the end. But it's just another way to gain access to primary resources. Especially we've been doing this for a long time, so we've been rolling with the punches with COVID, but this is the same seamless service we've been providing with access to digital primary resources. And this is all free on our website. And just want to take a moment to talk about our online resources that if you just go on our website, you can find here. And if you get a library, I encourage everyone, if you haven't already, I see some familiar names in the audience who do have library cards in the state library. It's different from your local county public library that we have resources such as current newspapers in North Carolina. So if you want to know what's going on, if your organization is mentioned in the news or different events, we have local newspaper. We have access to local newspapers throughout North Carolina from 1980s to like this morning. So that's all free with the library card. And I'll throw up the information in a moment with how to access that. And we have historic papers as well. And we have several different ways to, different tools for that. But most notably and new to our collection is the News and Observer and the Charlotte Observer dating back from 1910 as well as 1886. And we do have a selection of Black historical newspapers that are online. I think they're in Virginia, but all this information is on our website. And here's just another of our databases that we have. And we also have our Ancestry Library Edition, so that if you're helping with local history or trying to find more biographical information, we have that available temporarily. There's access through March of 2021, but we have access to free online journals, full articles, full text articles. So again, throwing a lot of information at you, but if you need anything, really just contact the library and we can help you, or you can contact me directly. We have our research guides that, as an example, we also made a companion guide to the Mayancy from A to Z book that goes from online resources to print resources for all the topics explored in that book. So I mentioned before our online chat, and I encourage everyone to get a library card. This is the URL, and I can throw it in the chat in a minute. And really, this was just crash course. Here's my information. We're happy to do training for you and your staff. And, or if you don't necessarily have to be in Raleigh to use the library, everything that I'm sorry.
Thank you so much, Rebecca. We appreciate your time today.
Sorry,
it looks like we have a couple of questions in the chat. So Adrian, can you walk us through those questions?
Absolutely. Thank you, Rebecca. I appreciate that. Folks, I also did mention, I know we're going a little bit over on time, so if you do have to leave us, I completely understand. Do know that we are recording the remainder of this session and that will be sent to your email. The question that I have here in the chat now is, do you recommend contracting a social media assistant?
Yeah.
So that might be more directed towards Katie.
Yeah, so I think yes, in that I think that having a person that's able to help out is definitely going to save you a lot of time if you're able. I think the biggest part of where time comes from is the content creation part. So that's the planning, that's the video editing, that's really where a lot of the time is. And there's actually a lot of people out there in digital marketing or digital content that are freelancers. A good place to go to would be Fiverr. So Fiverr.com has a lot of freelance people out there who will work on projects. You can get really good rates. I've also seen a lot of museums build, if they're able, build-in content creation into grants so that you have that funding to be able to create that videos, create that, and then you can contract that out to people. So I think if you financially are able to, it is a great resource because you can, one, you can help fund freelance content creators and also bring another perspective. Some of the best work we've had is when we have contracted out and had other people from different types of that have worked in different types of brands. So even if it's not museums, a lot of times they bring out a really good perspective. So yes, I would say if you're able to do that, definitely look into it. But once again, kind of figure out what your capacity is and what you feel like the amount of time you have to spend on social media a week or a month, and then work from there.
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. It looks like we have another question that's directed towards Rebecca. Rebecca, how do you get a historic neighborhood included in NCpedia?
Sure, we are always looking for information. So if anyone wants to write an article, anyone who's on here about your research area or your historic neighborhood, you can contact me. You can go to the NCpedia site or just contact me and we'll follow up. But really, we have people from all over contributing different articles because you are the content experts, and we really here at the library are just kind of the repository to collect those items and then share them out. And mostly everything in the NCpedia is free in terms of like copyright and things like that. There's some things, but if you decide to write something, we can work with you on permissions if you want to share that out for other people to use or just have it as something that's protected. So hopefully that answers your question.
Katie, Karen, and Rebecca, thank you so much for your wealth of knowledge and sharing that with us today. We certainly appreciate it.